Welcome to episode 29 of the all-wheel drive Mustang project, Project Traction. Well, a lot has happened in the last 2 months. Obviously, the primary goal was to get the supercharger on the car and start ripping around it with the world's first all-wheel drive boosted Mustang here. There was a few things that had to happen before that, though, so there's a lot to cover, and so let's get right into it. The first goal was to machine the one-piece CV axles to replace the temporary three-piece, really, if you count the tube, welded axles. These were first machined out of pre-hardened 4340. I had it heat-treated to about 45 Rockwell RC and turned them to diameter and then proceeded to spline them. Similar to how I did the cross shaft or the jack shaft that goes through the oil pan, or you can watch my video where I resplined the main shaft of the transmission. It was a very similar process using a carbide insert on a single tooth cutter and my CNC indexer to get all of the teeth around the circumference of both sides of the shafts. Mocking up the new solid one-piece CV axles to make sure the length is right. There's no question it's close, but it's going to work out. So this is at the extreme of the bump travel and turned all the way one direction, which is the required longest travel, I guess. And this is not even realistic because you can't turn the wheel this much without the tires hitting the inside here, as you can see by the rub marks on the fender liner. But anyways, it's good to go. Here's the new one-piece machined CV axles to replace the two-piece welded ones. And they're about 60 thousandths longer, which isn't that much, just to account for the new motor position and basically from some better measuring. But they turned out great, and now it's on to final assembly. Next on the list was the lengthening the steering shaft. The rack being a little bit lower on the new tubular crossmember required the shaft to be about 1/4 inch longer, but I also made it a little stronger by adding some plug welds. Another minor tweak is, since the engine was lower down, I had to reduce the height of my sway bar spacers by the same 3/8 of an inch. And finally, I put on my new beautiful two-piece performance friction two-piece rotors. Not only do they save 22 pounds, they just look fantastic. So here's a final shot of everything put together with the new cross member, the new one-piece CV axles, the rack in its final position. You can see the clearance to the new slightly lengthened steering shaft here. Everything came together quite great. I did have to readjust the bump steer once again since the rack is slightly lower. But everything worked out great using the same technique as before, the mirror and the laser, and everything is ready to go. Now that all the actual mechanical modifications for the all-wheel drive system were up to date and complete, I wanted to do one last thing before installing the supercharger, and that was replacing the oil pump gears and the crank sprocket for the variable cam timing. This can be a known weak issue, and I just wanted to have a little peace of mind, so I went ahead and did all that in advance of putting on the supercharger. I also went ahead and replaced the crank bolt with a Kinetic Motorsports stud that's supposed to add some strength to the snout of the crank. I'm not sure if this is required, but I said what the heck. Now on to the exciting part, actually installing the VMP Odin Supercharger. First, I want to do a big shout out to VMP Performance and Justin at VMP, who spent a lot of time with me on the phone discussing the details of the installation and my unique requirements because of the all-wheel drive. So big shout out to VMP and all their help in supporting the channel. So on that note, let's discuss the installation. So here's the VMP Odin installed in the car, and I'm not going to go into great detail on the installation. VMP has an excellent video on YouTube that describes step by step how to install it. My only comment on that is the video is a little bit out of date in the sense that it shows the older generation reservoir, and it also shows the older generation pump, the intercooler pump, and It's a little bit different to install. They now include a really nice brushless DC intercooler pump. You know, basically what used to be the upgrade is now standard. Same thing with this bigger tank is now standard. Now you can see here I did modify the kit a little bit in the sense that this tank here, which comes with the kit, which is quite nice looking, is meant to be further back. And on a non-performance pack car, this brace isn't here. And so these three mounting ears of the tank are supposed to mount on these three screws of the supercharger. And well, I didn't want to take that off. And matter of fact, my long-term goal is to put in the VMP ice chest tank right here and get rid of all this, which I actually already have, but didn't have it in time to get it on the wheels, and so I used the tank to come with it. So anyways, being the creative person I am, I guess, I CNC machined this little adapter here that bolted the three front screws and moved it forward and down to clear this brace and clear the hood. There's actually tons of clearance here, and basically just had to tweak the hoses a little bit to make all that work, and then allowed me to keep that K-brace that the performance pack cars have. But otherwise everything went really smooth. I hope all this makes you appreciate how some of these projects can take forever, especially when you have other obligations, we'll say. But it was finally time to do the test cruise with the all-wheel drive, now supercharged beast here, and so I was quite excited and ready to go rip on it a little bit. You gotta love that supercharger whine. That is extremely addicting. Okay, you ready?
Oh, it's all green.
So, okay, now that the car was basically working, I guess maybe being an engineer and being a little too cautious, I basically kind of snuck up on it and just started driving it around, driving it to work and trying to make sure everything was okay before I went too crazy. And the big goal was to make it to the big car show here in the Twin Cities area of Minnesota, which is the Summer Nationals at the State Fair. Which I did make, but we'll talk about that later in the video. So I just started driving it around, and I work about 22 minutes away, and it quickly became obvious there was a couple issues with the car. One is the drive shaft vibration, the same one I've had the last two seasons when I've driven the car. The drive shaft, just something ain't right with it, and we'll get into more detail on that later too. But the more immediate thing was basically every time I drove it for a long time and at high speeds, like going to work, and I'd be averaging 70 miles an hour, when I got there, there would just be diff oil or diff fluid everywhere, all over underneath the car, hitting the cats. It was really bad. And so I wasn't sure what was going on. That did not happen last fall. I drove it, I don't know, for hundreds of miles last fall, and that did not happen. And so I thought, well, did I just not seal up the diff properly when I put it back together? Is the diff cover leaking? Is it leaking between the diff and the oil pan? What is the oil pan leaking? What's going on? And so I spent some time investigating, and nothing was obvious. And I thought, well, it really seems like it's the breather of the differential. But unfortunately with my design, that is just buried underneath behind the AC compressor, and to get to it properly you'd have to take the whole front of the car apart again, and I was not looking forward to that. And so I finally one night had a eureka moment. It's like, well, what if I take the AC compressor off, and of course that belt, get it up on the lift, and run it at high speeds long enough to get it hot. If it's the breather, I should be able to see the oil come out. And so that's what I did. I had my son film the breather while I had it. I was basically going like 90 miles an hour in the air, and there was success. It was quite obvious, you know, there was oil coming out of the breather. So I think this is kind of cool footage. So I'm going to add this in, and then I'll talk about what I actually did to solve the issue. So I did three basic things to fix the problem. First was I put in one of these kind of generic, Amazon engine crankcase breathers actually, but rather than having it go through like a PCV system, I just have the vent of the diff going to the bottom of this, and then the top is just breathing here, and I plugged all the other ports. So that has worked tremendously, but I also simultaneously went from 80-90 non-synthetic to a 75-140 synthetic. I think really one of the bigger issues and why it wasn't doing this last fall was it's just a lot hotter, and I think the diff being bolted to the engine, the diff just gets really hot, and the oil was getting thin and getting splashed around a lot more. And in that same vein, rather than filling up the gear oil all the way to the fill plug, even though the diff cover that I made copied the factory diff level or fill level, I only put 1.25 in, which is what the Toyota manual says to put in, versus filling it up all the way to the fill plug. So those three things have solved the issue. I haven't had any. This is this is in the future now, and I've been driving it for a month plus, and basically nothing has come out of this vent, versus every other attempt to fix it was a oil everywhere debacle. So I'm pretty excited about that. It even looks pretty nice, and it is the long-term solution. So one of the big goals was to make it to the Street Machine Nationals, which is a big car show held every year at the Minnesota State Fairgrounds. And I've been going literally for 20 plus years, bringing my Mercury or just walking around, and I was excited to bring the Mustang there for the first time and show it off, and it actually was working fantastic, and I got a lot of interaction with some great people.
Class will be getting a free entry into the next year.
The whole point of the car or the project is that you can't tell it's all-wheel drive. And so I was pondering how to be able to show this off at the show, and my quick and dirty solution was to quickly make some wooden ramps to get the car off the ground while not being on jacks, so you could see the undercarriage. And then I added a mirror so you could basically see the front diff and the axles, and I have to say it worked pretty good, and I got a lot of good questions out of the audience.
This adapter that goes in between, it also holds the tranny mount, right? And I had to make the whole shifter. I'll have a good picture of that. You can check that out if you want the video. But so the CV joint goes through a big arc, whereas if you were to design this
Right, yeah, right, exactly. Right.
Obviously, he's sitting on the wheels right now on the ramps. And this is it's
Perfect, yeah. Perfect.
but it's running 295 tires all around. So now it's just got. And I bought the stuff to 20. So I can make my own wheels.
Custom make your own chains.
That was, if you're just doing one set, what I did makes no sense. But I just, as a personal mission, I wanted to accomplish.
I was at the show with some friends, including my friend Kevin with the Hellcat, my friend Jeff with a Nova actually sitting on a C5 Vet chassis, and Derek's Continental with a Coyote swap and a Cobra IRS in the back. So after the car show, which was in late July, it's now late August, or about a month ago, once again, the plan was to just keep on ramping it up, driving it harder, being more aggressive. So I actually was driving it all over the place. Went to a Cars and Coffee and was driving it to a friend's place to show it off, to be honest. And on one of those things on the way back, it just died like 3 blocks from the house, and I had to get it towed home. And once again, nothing to do with the all-wheel drive. The 72,000 mile stock fuel pump went out. So use that as an excuse. That delayed me a week to order it and install it, but I ended up getting a DW 400, Deutschwerks 400 fuel pump, and couple that with the VMP voltage booster, and I should be good to go for a long time on pump gas when it comes to the fuel pump. And so that was unfortunate, but a straightforward fix. So the big issue is the drive shaft. And to be honest, I delayed making this video because I wanted the next video to not be another it's not quite done video. I wanted this one to be it going to the track, or at least doing some street craziness. And I've had just a few bugs, the front diff, the fuel pump, and really the big elephant in the room is the rear drive shaft. It vibrates. And so, but I wanted to make sure that was true. And so I did something. I didn't film any of this because I was hoping just to fix it and move on, and once again get footage of it doing crazy stuff on the street and track. But I actually took the whole drive shaft out of the car and then went into the controller for the all-wheel drive and basically locked it up so that would power the front wheels, and drove it around like with no rear drive shaft. Literally, I made the world's first front-wheel drive S550 Mustang. And I drove it all over the place whole evening, hitting like 90 miles an hour. And as expected, it was perfectly smooth. There was no vibrations. It absolutely is the rear drive shaft. And so once I determined that, I said that I tried to fix it. I had to exhaust off this car so many times to get to the drive shaft, and I reclocked it, measured the runout of my adapters, got the angles for the transmission and diff just perfect, which did help but didn't solve it, and even took the drive shaft out and brought it to a place an hour away, so that's like 4 hours if you do all that of my time, and they claimed they could balance it to perfection. Well, they balanced it, and it's worse. It went from being really annoying to like I really don't want to drive the car. Like at 60 it just shakes. And so why is that? Basically, the first place I'd shortened it, I'm convinced they got it crooked. But second is the flange that's on the drive shaft that bolts to the diff. I realized that nobody has the appropriate adapter for that to spin it with that part on there. So everybody's balancing it without that on there. And so I measured the runout on the diff side, and I'm getting just horrendous runout on the drive shaft. And so I gave up, right? That is just a dead end. And so I reached out, and it's already on its way. It's not here yet, but I'm getting the drive shaft I really wanted the whole time, which is a double CV joint drive shaft from the drive shaft shop. And that should be here next week. And then the goal is to go to the drag strip and really prove this thing. Probably the 8th mile first. There's one about an hour away I go to. And then I have 3 more tries to go to my local quarter-mile track has 3 more test and tunes before the end of the season. So the mission is to get the drive shaft, get that installed, should fix the vibration, and then get the footage that everybody wants, this thing actually getting abused. Don't get me wrong, I have abused it on the street. Just didn't film it that much, to be honest. But Anyways, no four-wheel burnouts yet. So if you want to see any of that future action going to the track, so please like and subscribe, and make sure you hit that bell notification so you know when the next video comes out. And until then, I appreciate it, and thanks for watching.